Good morning, beloved ones. Turn to someone and tell them, you look marvelous. You look marvelous. You look marvelous. Yes. I'm so glad that divine order is always at work, especially in our music, because we never plan what it is, and we just allow Spirit to bring up whatever the message is that I'm to share, and somehow He picks it up by osmosis or whatever, and it becomes a wonderful experience for us. And that whole concept of it is well, I think it's good that we start with that premise. You see, we begin with the knowing that it is well, that everything is in divine and most sacred and perfect order. Because there will be times when we might not be able to see that with the naked eye, right? There are times when perhaps what is happening in the outer overwhelms our senses, and we might momentarily lapse into a state of unconsciousness, and we forget the truth. Because I was thinking, I'm like, wow, I can't hardly believe the times that we're living in right now. I can't help on occasion feel that we are really at a critical point in our country's expression in history and life. And therefore, we're at a critical point, a critical juncture also for the rest of the world as well. Because like it or not, we in this country, the United States of America, carries a great deal of influence and has a great impact within the world. You know, sort of, someone said, as America goes, the world goes. Good or bad. We impact things, and the eyes of the world are upon us right now, looking to see whether we are going to be able to stand in our truth, whether we're going to be able to stand upon the words of all of our spiritual documents, whether it's the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, all of that, whether or not we will actually have the ability to make that a living reality. And so the world is watching. Those of us in the country, we are watching. Now, there are two things that I never thought I would see in my lifetime. And the first one was the election of an African American president. Now, I don't think I just didn't think that would happen in my lifetime, but it did. It happened not once, but it happened twice. And the second thing is possibly a fallout or a result of the first thing. Because I never thought I would see a national election so filled with vitriolic energy, negativity, and even the brink of outright violence that actually threatens the very fabric of our democracy. I never thought, because I would wonder, how could other countries sort of get there? You know, how did Rome fall? Right? How did a great empire be brought to its knees? And I never thought that I would see that we might be standing on the brink of such an occasion for us as well. And yes, as it threatens the fabric of our democracy and who we are, and it challenges us, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Because we're having to look deep, aren't we not? We're having to see some things. But this could also negatively impact the world, this outcome of this election. And I'm not saying which way or the other. That's for you all to decide. But I know that the outcome can also affect not only the world, but our allied relationships, our standing in the world, and others in the world seeing us and relating to us, and the manner in which that will occur will be dictated by what we do. Not to mention the possibility of civil disruption in our own country. You know, we've seen that before. We've had a horrendous civil war that affected the lives of many, many people and the outcome of the path we decided to take. We've seen it before in the 60s with civil rights expression and demonstration, and we've seen again both sides of what was possible in the horrendous expression and experience of man is inhumanity to man. Water hoses and dogs, we've seen that. But I'm not too sure that we also might be on the precipice of seeing again yet another deep expression in our unfolding and our growing. I was on Facebook, and sometimes I have to just get off it because you know it has a plethora of everything. I try to do it so I can keep my pulse on what's happening out there. What are people feeling and thinking? What's out there? Now, a lot of it is not necessarily good. It's not positive. But I saw an interview by a gentleman who was sharing that how the militia was gearing up for November 9th. Not November 8th, but November 9th. And how they had been stockpiling food and rations and what was happening. And they painted this picture, and I thought, golly, is that a possibility? Of course, see, here's the thing. I'm thinking, well, how did we get here? How did we get here? Now, of course, I know how we got here. But that doesn't preclude me still asking, wow, how did we get here? See, spiritually speaking, I know that it is all part of this evolutionary shift that is occurring. I know that. Spiritually, it is truly about unearthing things that must be acknowledged and healed as a part of our growth process. What's taking place is in divine order. It is moving us along our path from our limited human expression to our more spiritual and divine expression. But that process isn't always pretty, and it isn't always easy. So I know that that is what's happening, and I can have faith that the end product of that experience, of this unearthing, is going to be fine. And so that gives me faith. That's spiritually speaking. Psychologically speaking, I also know that what is happening is a part and parcel of what I call unchecked and unacknowledged fear. What is happening is the result of unchecked and unacknowledged fear. Fear on a multiple expression, or multiple levels. Fear that someone might get what you believe is yours. Fear that there's not enough to go around. Or fear that your way of being or your way of life might be altered by others. Fear of cultural change, or fear of change itself, cultural or otherwise. Fear that one's rights may be revoked. As if a single person can revoke the Second Amendment. Hello? There's a process. One person doesn't carry that. There's checks and balances within the governmental system, which people seem to have forgotten about. And so fear then takes over, right? There's a fear of maybe having to share the wealth. Fear on, I could go on and on and on. Fear on so many different levels. But the point is that when fear takes over, our best and our highest expression of who we are is thwarted. Right? Fear, outside of being a part of our primal instinct for survival, there is a positive essence to fear. We needed to have that sense so that we could survive. You needed to be able to outrun the dinosaur. No, it's true, right? You need to have some smarts so you can figure out how you can survive. But the leftover residual need not take over our present day experience and expression. You no longer need to outrun dinosaurs. And therefore our use and our expression and our experience of fear must be different. So outside of this primal instinct, fear can be a big pain in the neck. And I'll say in the neck. For us psychologically, right? It can be a pain in the neck for us psychologically because it interferes with how we experience life and its circumstances. Fear interjects itself so that we then have a different experience of what is or is not happening. There's conscious fear. We all have conscious fears. We know things that we are fearful of. And yet, of course, there are also unconscious fears, fears that run us, fears that impact our lives without our awareness. Now, here's where the problem comes in. When the fears that are unconscious within us begin to operate and impact and move us towards action without our awareness, what happens is they begin to wreak havoc in our life and in our affairs, without our understanding the source from whence it even comes. Conscious fears are challenging enough in and of themselves. But imagine dealing with unconscious fears because they are harder to heal. You don't know you have them. And because of that, when unconscious fears begin to act out, you begin to act out. Right? You begin to act out. You begin to project those unconscious fears onto others, onto a situation, onto a circumstance. All of a sudden, you begin to resist whatever is before you. You might even find yourself being angry or upset or even out of control, much like of what we are seeing in our nation today. It's just a reflection. That outer is a reflection of inner. It's symbolic of what is taking place within and what we need to see within our individual selves as well as our collective self. And until we begin to bring these fears to the light within us, that they will continue to take us down a path of destruction. When fear takes over, we have a tendency to react rather than respond. See, right? When you respond, it's a conscious choice. When you are reacting, there's no consciousness within it. It is all coming out of base emotions. We react from a base level of consciousness that may not be in alignment with what is even true. Doesn't even matter if it's true. It's coming from a base reaction based on what we are fearing. Not even what we are thinking and knowing and understanding, but what we're fearing. When fear takes over, it has a tendency to distort our judgments and may even cause us to simply judge others, from in a limited way. In fact, whenever we begin to judge and fear takes over through judgment, it causes us to focus on limitations in general, right? It doesn't expand. Fear doesn't expand the consciousness. Fear does not expand the consciousness. It constricts it. Therefore, we see very little of the truth. And that's a dangerous thing. when we act on the little we know and think we see the what? Whole picture. When fear takes over, we're not even able, perhaps, to experience and express love, peace, harmony, or any other life-affirming qualities of being or life-affirming emotions that would actually connect us to others. What happens is it causes us to separate and divide ourselves as being apart from, not connected to, the other. Because when fear takes over, self-preservation begins to kick in. But it's self-preservation sometimes built upon a false sense of self. A false sense of self, which then leads to selfishness and self-centeredness. And we begin to see the other as a threat to our sense of self. You understand? This is deep. We have to understand the process of what happens and when fear takes over. We begin to, I must protect myself, my world, what I have, my things. You become the enemy, the threat. Meanwhile, it's all built upon a false sense of self. Because the true self, the divine self, the God self, has no limitations. There are no walls of separation. There is no lack and limitation. There's a knowing, there's the fullness of God's presence in your life and in your affairs. The true self is open to the divine qualities that speak to the affirmation and the lifting up and the building up of you as a spiritual being and others as your brother, your sister, a child of God, a spiritual, the beloved community, not me and they. When fear takes over, you can't even hear the still small voice of God. Because oftentimes divine guidance and divine direction comes to you in the quiet of your mind. And therefore, you may actually miss it when fear takes over because you miss it because of the loud chatter that's in your head. See, this is the thing. Fear produces mental chatter. It produces conflicting voices. It gives you a lot of the what ifs. What if this? What if that? What if thoughts? It actually short circuits your receiving channel, and that all you get then is static and confusion when fear takes over. You can't hear the still small voice that says, this is the way. Walk ye in it. I got this. This is the way. Can't hear it. You hear the chatter. Fear produces mental chatter in the head and in the heart. When fear takes over, a lot of things begin to happen. And one of them is that your sensibility goes out of the window. Think about it. When fear takes over, your reasoning becomes distorted, and you may even become irrational. Not thinking, conscious, rational thought, but irrational, doing things and thinking things based on false evidence appearing real. That we know is the definition, the metaphysical definition of fear, right? False and evidence appearing real. And what happens is we begin then, when we are not in the right consciousness, we begin to then even come to erroneous conclusions about what we think is happening, what we think is taking place, which then leads us to making limiting choices and poor decisions. We're irrational. And we act from that place. When fear takes over, you lose the power to stand in your faith. And if you can't stand upon the faith, which is like a rock, faith is what? A rock. That's what he defined when Jesus said, I'm going to call you Peter. And upon this rock, I'm going to build my church. Upon faith, right? So what happens if you can't stand upon the faith, which is like a rock that provides a sure thing, provides a strong foundation, then the sinking sands of fear will weaken you, and you become unsteady, unsure, and ungrounded. Somebody say unsteady, unsure, ungrounded. And life begins to toss you to and fro, right? Because you don't have any roots. You're not standing upon something solid. You're standing on sinking ground, and fear is sinking ground. So if you want to be rock steady, you have to learn to stand upon faith. Tell somebody, I'm rock steady. I am rock steady. I'm rock steady. See, one of the things that we found ourselves doing more than ever before in this particular election is fact checking. Checking to see if what is said is true or false. And so I began to think, spiritually speaking, we need to do some faith checking, right? Faith checking within ourselves to see if what we are saying to ourselves is either true or false. We got to do some faith checking. But before you can get to the faith checking to see if what you're telling yourself and saying to yourself is true or false, you might have to start with some fear checking. Because not only do we have to put our fears in check, we have to check out whether they are true or not. And then from there, we can do some faith checking. Because remember, fears can be conscious or unconscious. So we've got to begin to do some fear checking. That is, check your fears. See if they're true. Discover what they are. See, I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to awaken consciously. And because of that, I've been trying to tap into my unconscious fears, because I understand that if I don't, or if I can't see them, or understand them, or see them in myself, or check, they will continue to just simply run me. And all of my meditating and praying and oming and, all that good stuff will go for naught, because this other stuff underneath is moving me in directions I don't want to go, reacting in ways I don't want to react. You ever felt, why am I reacting? I know the truth, but why am I reacting this way? I know the truth principles. Why am I feeling this? Unchecked fear. Unconscious stuff running your life. And so I want to be able to face them and see them and heal them so that I can begin to experience a level of freedom and authenticity in my life and in my affairs. I want to see them. So here's a tip. When you find yourself in repeated patterns of experience, or when you find yourself feeling upset or angry or frightened or hesitant or resistant, ask yourself, what am I afraid of? What am I afraid of? Because that's not a question that we are used to asking ourselves. Whenever any of those other things happening, anger, this, that, we begin to rationalize and cover it up and make it look pretty and deny that it's even happening. But ask yourself, what am I afraid of? Because this question, it can shed a great deal of light on your situations and your circumstances if you can get to the answer to the question. It will really help and heal you. You can get to the answer. Now, in order to get to some real answers, not those to the question, what am I afraid of? Because the moment you do that, the mind is a tricky thing. It may not want you to really see what's going on, so it's going to say, well, it's them. And we love to make it about them. right? It's what they did, it's what they said. It's not about my reaction to what they did, it's about what they did. No, it's about you. Why are you responding that way? You can't control their actions. And if they are engendering some kind of response in you, then that's a divine appointment. You need to look at that. Not look at them, look at you. Because there's something in you that's being triggered, which means it might be an unchecked and an unacknowledged fear. So we then begin to say, wow, what's happening in me? How can I unearth? So you might have to dig deep and uncover layer after layer, several layers of this stuff until you get to a place of knowing. You get to a place of understanding. Not about them, you understand something within yourself. And to understand is something that stands under. You want to get to what is standing under, right? Your fears. You want to get to what is standing in your way. Because if you can get to what's standing under your fears and what's standing in your way, once you can begin to see that, then you'll also be able to begin to see what you need to stand upon. If you can see what's standing under, you then know what you need to do to stand upon the truth, to stand upon some faith that's going to set you free, that's going to enable you to counter your fears, to cancel your fears, and to conquer your fears. And the truth is what will do that for you. It'll set you free. So you might want to make a list or keep a journal of some of your fears so that you can get in touch with them. And then once you begin to start by fear checking, not fact checking, because facts change, right? We want some faith checking. So before you get to the faith check, we're going to do some fear checking. And once you do the fear checking of outlining and understanding what it is you fear, then you do some faith checking. That is, you begin to write down a truth. Write down the truth about your fears. See, you write down a principle that conquers that truth, that nullifies that false statement of what you think is true. Counter that with some spiritual principles and put it all in perspective, because then you begin to bring the light of truth into your fears. You must begin to bring the light of truth into your fears. And you might have to do this often until the light begins to actually dissipate. So it's a process. It didn't just happen in you. It didn't just get stuck in you. You might have held a particular thought for 40, 30, 50 years, 60 years, I don't know. Long time. And so those kind of things, as Jesus said, that this kind only comes out by prayer and fasting. You might have to work on it a little bit. One little affirmation might not do it. You might need to develop a consciousness to unearth that deeply rooted stuff. But once you begin to bring the light in, the light is powerful. It'll help the process along. The scripture says that God did not give us a spirit of fear or timidity, but a sound mind, a strong spirit filled with power. That's what we were given. And so we have to begin to rely upon that, to live from that, to trust that process and that power that resides within us, and to have, as Jesus the Christ said, to have faith in it. Not fear, but faith. Because when faith takes over, unadulterated faith, when faith takes over, it's all over but the shouting. You understand? When faith takes over, it is all over but the shouting. You begin to live on a different vibration. You begin to live from the realm of possibility. And you become fearless and faithful. This is our time, friends. It's our time to live fully, right? From the fullness of life, to live in faith. And so, as we just started off, we know it is well. Blessings and namaste. Blessings. Namaste.
It is so good to be back.
Wonderful. It's so good to have you back.